Welcome to r/MaliciousCompliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. Manager told me to abandon my workstation, which is on a tight schedule to do his work. I complied and took my sweet time, caused the factory to lose about 40,000 euros because the production stopped. The second story. Company refused to solve the client's problem. Then he started playing games by their rules and the problem was solved. The third story. B customer won't listen when I try to tell her resume has lots of typos, so I make her copies exactly as she asked. She probably had a hard time finding a job as a copywriter when she couldn't even spell her own title or proofread her own resume. On to the first story. I did exactly as I was told. I'm a forklift driver for a supply company of the automotive industry, which means I'm supplying the raw materials to the line, where they would get processed into the final products, like door covers, handles, cup holders, etc. My company has usually 6 to 8 forklift drivers in the morning and midday shift, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. and 2 to 10 p.m., and 1 or 2 for the night shift in which production is basically non-existent, and maintenance and cleaning, tool changes in the machines take place. Today I was assigned to the injection molding line, which is the first and most crucial step of all production of the entire location. If this line stands, the entire factory stands still, costing about 1,200 euros per minute in material losses plus wages. It is a big deal because, like I said, these lines are like 98% automized. I mean automatic. The thing is, if it shuts down because of lacking supplies, there's no procedure for it. You have to push the emergency stop, or the machine will lock the containers inside of itself and you have to run the maintenance procedure, like 40 plus minutes to get them out and refill. Why the line locks the containers inside itself is a misery, but I know that it's because of something safety reason. And the big deal for this is not the shutting down or the refill. If you shut the machine down via emergency stop, the machine draws water from a tank and pours them onto the casting molds, to cool them in seconds and ruining them. Plus, the startup procedure of the line takes about 10 minutes with the calibration program, but changing the molds and going through startup for the in-section molding machine is still faster and therefore cheaper than running maintenance on the entire line, because if that is the case, every machine on the line runs startup one after another. This would be injection molding, automated quality check and sorting, painting, and a second quality check again with sorting, before finally being packed by a human. In full production, there are 3 people including me on the entire line. The thing is, due to the pandemic, vacation season, and the heat wave, the production was slowed down considerably from, as my workplace states, 120% to 70%. So we are already short-staffed, even for 70%. Instead of 6 to 8 forklift drivers, we were 3, 1 for the injection mold, 1 for the attached warehouse, and 1 for the assembly. This means nobody unloads or loads the trucks that are frequenting the factory. In their downtime, so in the midday shift, the entire shift, usually the manager would be required to handle these tasks. So me, as one of the faster workers, because I don't have to look at the logistics plans all the time and knows where all the places are, helps where I can in assembly, cause my station and assembly are right next to each other. Management sees it and thinks that my station has a problem, because this has to be the case. If I don't work my A off to keep the timing of the machines and orders me to unload 3 trucks and load them as well. Unloading a truck and clear away the raw materials costs about 10 to 15 minutes. Loading about 5, because the shipment is ready beforehand and put next to the loading bay. This means I couldn't be at my workstation for about 20 minutes. The problem is that the injection molding machine works on an automated schedule and needs to be resupplied exactly every 6 minutes, due to the size of the containers which holds the granulate. But being an efficient, reads lazy worker, I usually prep for about 18 minutes to cut down on travel distance and time if things get busy. I work my A off to keep my current task inside said 18 minutes, knowing very well where the blame goes if the factory comes to a standstill because of no supplies. But just as I were to drive back to my workstation, manager comes to me and demands that I have to unload and load the next one as well, whilst he takes his 30 minutes break. I don't want to, but I'm technically not a worker there, but a time employee, which meant that I'm not covered under labor laws for the specific workplace I'm assigned to. Think of it as a subcontractor, who basically rents employees to companies for a given amount of time. So manager can just tell me to not come to work anymore without any issue. Sure, my technically company has to continue to pay me, but I get a €3 bonus per hour on my base pay just to work at this company, which is on a voluntary basis for the contracted companies. Off to work I went. Of course, the entire factory came to a standstill just 5 minutes later, but management was out of house on break, and I had specific orders to unload and load this truck. And I took my sweet time since I had a coworker to back me up, since he heard the order from manager. And of course, manager was absolutely livid as he came back from break. I had my coworker have my back. He's an employee of this company and pretty much there since day one, if that holds any value. He's the reason I don't have to look at the plans and know where, what, and in which amount goes, and where I can store excess without it being in the way. The second story is exposed telephone line and how to get it buried. Okay, disclaimers first. This happened approximately in 2013 to 2014-ish. It's been a while. The conversations are obviously rephrased and are not necessarily verbatim. This story was told to me by the colleague in question. I've always known this dude to be a stand-up guy, and knowing what went on in this industry, I have no trouble believing the veracity of the story. Still, if he lied to me, I'm lying to you. Years ago, I worked in technical support for an Australian ISP called iNet. Colleague, let's call him Dave, which obviously wasn't his name, and I, both supported ADSL1 and ADSL2 plus connections running over PSTN, POTS. All the copper running between the telephone exchange and customer premises was owned by a third party, Telstra, and my company sold ADSL and phone services over their lines. Dave got a call from a customer who bought the property from a previous owner. The property was 100 plus years old, which is effing old in Australia, near the center of a major city. The previous owner was an old lady who only had a phone line there. They decided to renovate it and introduce basics like internet access. They called Dave, and Dave can obviously hear there's noise on the line. The copper lines, likely 60 plus years old, are probably to blame. Dave lodges the fault with Telstra. Few days later, they go out and fix the issue. Dave has the internet connected at the customer's property, and the speeds are below 1.5 megabytes per second, but the line length indicates they should be getting at least 8 megabytes per second. The customer had all the wiring in the house redone during the renovation and brought up to modern spec, so we know it's not customer's wiring. 1.5 megabytes per second is the minimum speed the line has to hit, so they go ahead, lodge an ADSL fault. Telstra sends a tech. Tech reports says no fault found. The customer gets slung with 200 plus AUD and incorrect callout fees. Internet still SH. Dave and customer go back and forth, eventually filing multiple phone and ADSL faults. It's obvious that the copper is SH because when it rains, there's noise on the line, but when the line dries out, the noise goes away. After multiple faults filed, Telstra finally sends out a team who digs up the line between the customer's house and the street, the so-called in-place. But no doubt due to some stupid reason, the trench crew have to leave before the Telstra tech dude even arrives to replace the wire. So the trench crew fills in the trench not to leave an unaccounted hazard. The Telstra tech comes later on, replaces the line, and just leaves it running over the front lawn, given that the trench is filled in. The customer calls in absolutely livid. When will the Telstra crew come in to bury the line? Dave checks with the wholesale contact, who tells him that the fault is resolved and the issue is closed. Nobody's coming. The customer asks if they can bury the line themselves, but our standing orders are to heavily discourage that. The cable is property of Telstra, and the trench has to be certain spec and other stuff. Dave informs him that they should not do it. The customer calls around with few companies who do such work, but the moment he tells them he wants them to bury a Telstra in place, they all nope the F out of the job. A few days later, the customer calls, wanting us to do something. We have nothing to do. The line is working properly now, so there's no fault. Ultimately, Telstra knows about the issue. Telstra's tech left it that way and noted so in his report. They just don't give an F. Dave asks customer for pictures of the cable. With the pictures, Dave goes to Telstra Wholesale, and after calling in a few favors, he manages to convince the dude at Telstra to add the issue to what they call Project List, which is a formal list of network segments needing improvements. But the list is prioritized by severity impact, and the Telstra Wholesale guy tells Dave that there's no ETA, and there are projects on this list that have sat there for 10 plus years. Dave informs the customer, and they're willing to give it a few months to see if Telstra does anything. 6 months later, they call. There's been no movement. There likely won't be any movement. So the customer asks Dave, "Customer, so you're telling me that the line is not supposed to run over open ground, and Telstra knows that, and they know the line is exposed and they still won't do anything?" Dave, "Pretty much." Customer, "And what happens if it gets damaged?" Dave, "Telstra has a legal obligation to keep the telephone line working, in case of emergency, so they must fix it within 2 to 5 working days. Customer, "And who pays for that?" Dave, "Telstra does. It's their property. You only pay if there's no fault for text time. This is why we cannot lodge a fault right now. Your line is working, but if it was not working, we could lodge a fault and they would fix it at their cost." Customer, "Okay." Couple days later, the customer calls, their phone is down. Their brother-in-law managed to snag the line and damage it with his car. Dave lodges a fault. Telstra comes out, fixes it, leaves the line above ground. A few weeks later, the customer calls again. They were moving their lawn and they hit the line with the lawnmower blade. No phone, fault filed. Telstra comes out and pays for the fix. The line is still above ground. A month later, the wife was gardening and accidentally put a shovel through the line. He apologized profusely. Fault filed. Telstra fixes. Telstra pays. Line still not buried. You get the idea. Every few weeks or months, they call with a more outrageous scenario that caused damage to the line. Every call out is at minimum 200 AUD a pop for Telstra. After the sixth fault is fixed, Dave called the customer for follow-up call to check if everything is working. The customer says it is. And funnily enough, Telstra Tech brought along a trenching crew, who buried the line properly. Customer said, curious they'd put in the effort to fix such a low-impact and low-severity issue. The last story is, copywriter will have a hard time finding a job with that resume. Many years ago, I worked at Kinko's, now FedEx office. I often worked graveyard shifts and had to deal with lots of people early in the morning who hadn't had their coffee yet. For some context, overnight was the time when long machine runs were printed, and tedious finishing work was done. Being the only one working until 6 a.m. when the morning crews started to trickle in, I was often in the middle of something when the customer came in, and it would take me a second to get to the counter to help them. One morning around 5 a.m. I'm in the back doing some binding work. I hear the door alarm and had just put a perfect binding in the heater. This takes about 15 to 20 seconds to melt the glue and bind the pages. Me, yelled from the back, I'll be right out. B customer. BC yells back, I'm in a hurry. I finish the binding and get up to the counter. Me, sorry about the wait, what can I do for you? BC, can I see your resume paper selection? Our resume papers were literally sitting 6 inches away from her on the counter, in a little bound book that had resume paper printed in big bold letters. I slide the book over in front of her and open it up. As she flips through it, she proceeds to complain about the color and texture of every paper before asking me the price. Me, 15 cents per copy plus 7 cents if you want to print on the second side. BC, that's expensive. Don't you have any better paper for that price? Me, sorry, that's our full selection of resume papers. The only other options are plain white copy paper, Astro Brights, neon colored, or cardstock. Are you gonna need this double-sided or single-sided? I could see that she had in front of her a 2-page resume, which usually printed single-sided. BC, which one is cheaper? Me, double-sided will be cheaper, but for resumes our customers usually prefer single-sided. BC, just give me 50 copies double-sided on the sandstone. I confirm her selection and head back to the copier to complete her order. I print out a proof, and as a matter of quality assurance I give it a once-over to confirm we're not getting any fuser marks, random spots, streaks, etc. I noticed that her job title on her most recent job was something like copywriter. I assumed she meant copywriter and confirmed as much by reading a bit of the description. Me, ma'am, I noticed your previous job title is... BC interrupting. I'd appreciate it if you didn't snoop on my personal information. Me, I apologize, I just noticed a typo. BC, please just print my order. Me, malicious compliance kicking in. Okay. I printed the entire stack of 50 resumes and was squaring them up when I noticed lorem ipsum dolor sit amet in the last paragraph on the page. At this point I had to tell her, right? As I'm walking over to the counter to show her the missed filler text, she yells, BC, will you please not crimp the pages? I need to hand those out. So I make it to the counter, gently placing her copies in a bag, and rang her out. She did come back later to complain, but my manager assured her that we don't make it a practice to proofread customers' documents as that's their responsibility. Edit. This all took place around 25 years ago. At that time, the prevailing method for finding work was going to businesses in person and dropping off a resume and cover letter. The other options were mailing and faxing. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, hit the like button, and have a good day.